Support for KQED Live comes from Berkeley Rep.
Support for KQED comes from the Asian Art Museum. Visitors can step into an experience like no other at TeamLab Continuity and become part of a wondrous ecosystem of lush natural imagery that dynamically evolves around them. For more information and ticket reservations, visit asianart.org.
The disproportionate impact of
more than half of Black business owners.
And disproportionate.
Somehow we always find a way to rise.
To the blueprint builders, to the backbones of every block, for the curators of the culture, and for generations to follow. You might fall, but never fail. Keep rising, keep rising, keep rising. Apply for business, marketing, and tech makeovers on us.
So glad I'm flying out of Oakland today. Let's count the reasons why. For one, flying locally reduces my carbon footprint. Plus, my airport supports over 17,000 jobs in the East Bay. And it makes sense. The more I fly from OAK, the more flights airlines will add out of OAK. All good.
No matter where you live in the Bay Area, there are many great reasons to pick OAK and fly the East Bay way.
What you do with that extra hour is up to you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Michael Lissip. I'm President and CEO of KQED. And welcome to KQED Live here in this beautiful new space that we call the Commons, nested in this incredibly renovated new headquarters in San Francisco's Mission District. KQED Live is our new live event series in person and streaming online. But KQED Live is more than just events. It's about experiences. This is where we bring our journalism, our storytelling, our programming to life so that we can spark bold conversations and amplify our civic and cultural vitality. I gotta tell you, I am so fired up about this evening with Kelly Corrigan. She is truly one of my favorite people, and she is a rising star in public media, and I am most proud to say that she is a friend. We both live in Oakland, 510, the five and dime, as we used to call it. We've walked our neighborhoods together, talking about the power of public media, and she uses media for good, so you're gonna have a great evening. But I'm also so excited because this is my first in-person community event in more than 18 months, and I've so missed personal connection. Thank you. And I know that I'm stating the obvious when I say it's been so hard to be separated and isolated. And I want you to know what has gotten me through this and KQED through it is when you are in times of crisis, you focus on what matters most. And what matters most to KQED is our community service, serving each and every one of you. Our mission is to inform, inspire, and involve. Inform with trusted journalism. Inspire with stories about the human experience. Involve with events like these so we can have civic dialogue, spirited debate, and cultural experiences together. And the KQED staff, so resilient, so dedicated, so committed, and they take this responsibility to serve you very seriously. But what I want you to know most is that just as you depend on us, we absolutely rely on you. Because everything that we do is made possible by your support. Whether you watch, you listen, you show up at these events, go online for our educational resources, or especially if you are a member. KQED is the most listened to, the #1 radio station in the Bay Area. And by the way, out of all news and information radio stations in the country, we are in the top 5. About 1 in 2 Bay Area adults use at least one KQED service. And our membership, 257,000 individuals who voluntarily give to us because you believe and trust our work. And here we are. I mentioned this spectacular renovation. By the way, a 5-year project from idea to design to fundraising to the transformation with technology that can expand our production and distribution and spaces like this one where we can bring people together. 5-year project almost entirely funded by philanthropy and individual giving. So the most important thing that I can say this evening is thank you, thank you, thank you for supporting us. Now, speaking of appreciation, I want to express our gratitude to the KQED Live sponsors. You learned a little bit about them. Asian Art Museum, Berkeley Rep, Comcast Business, and Oakland International Airport. They're not just financial supporters, they're partners in helping us build community. And one special announcement this evening, the Asian Art Museum asked us to do a random raffle for 3 pairs of tickets to their new exhibit. Called Team Lab Continuity, and I have the winners right here. I'm going to call your names out. Raise your hands, and someone will walk the tickets out to you. Dawn Valentine. Dawn, congratulations. Susan Donaldson. And Vicky Feldstein. Congratulations. Hope you enjoy Team Lab Continuity. All right, on now to our program, a preview of the new season of Tell Me More with Kelly Corrigan. And if you know the series, you know the title is perfect because it is fundamentally about curiosity. And if you've watched the series, you know you want to know more because the stories are inspiring about people who are making a difference and doing positive things in their community. You're going to see 2 stories, 2 people, 2 Bay Area folks who are well loved on the national stage. Also joining us tonight, very talented, good person, Steve Goldbloom. You'll meet him in a little bit. And then, of course, there's Kelly Corrigan, New York Times bestselling author, podcast talent, television series host. She's thoughtful, compassionate, insightful, funny, and she's making a big difference in the Bay Area. You may also know she's been the host of Notes and Words for 12 years, raising millions of dollars for Children's Hospital in Oakland. And so with that, thank you again for coming out. Tell your friends, come back for more. We'd love to see you. And please give a warm welcome to Kelly Corrigan.
Hi. That was really nice. That was like a little too nice. Hi. Thanks for coming. It's so awesome to see you in person. I almost recognize half of you. So the only context I want to give you before you watch these 2 episodes is that we are really Ted Lasso in a world of Succession. We are trying to surface world-positive people doing hard work well. And I think the only criticism I might give myself or I might get as these roll out is that I'm sort of in the bag for every guest that we got. But I think it's by design. I think that we purposely wanted to platform people who are doing the hardest work there is in ways that are effective and exemplary and maybe even inspirational. So enjoy.
Major funding for Tell Me More with Kelly Corrigan is provided by the Penner Family Foundation, along with support from the Gordon and Laura Gund Foundation.
I think the last era of America that we just went through has in some ways altered the course of this country's history. There was still this idea, this narrative that America is the greatest country in the world. I think that's a wrap. And now it becomes up to us. Not that I care about the narrative of the greatest country in the world, but do we actually want to live up to those myths? And right now, to use a sports analogy, I think it's a jump ball.
enduring American pastime to talk about America. What's true of us, what's going wrong, how we've changed. But it's unusual to meet someone who has made it his project to see as much of our country as W. Kamau Bell has. First as a kid who moved often with his mother, then as a stand-up comedian working out his ideas on club stages, and now as the host and executive producer of the Emmy-winning docuseries, The United Shades of America. W. Kamau Bell has had more conversations with more people about more deeply uncomfortable topics than anyone I know. He's visited school teachers and anti-abortion doctors, farmers and KKK members, and Bible Belt atheists. I sat down with Kamau at the Oakland Museum of California to ask what all that listening and learning has helped him appreciate about our country, who we are, and who we might become. I'm Kelly Corrigan. This is Tell Me More, and here's my conversation with comedian and political provocateur, W. Kamau Bell.
So my first question.
Yeah, wrong way. It's going this way.
I'm used to doing this, so.
Hi, W. Kamau Bell.
Hello.
How are you? Thanks for coming.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So an interesting thing about comedy and the potential for impact is that it really depends on who shows up. So you did this thing that I thought was so interesting is you would give a free ticket to someone if they would bring someone of a different race.
Yeah. So I had a crisis of career at one point. Like, what am I doing with my life? What am I doing with comedy? I decided to basically start over. And I wrote this show called The W. Kamau Bell Curve, Ending Racism in About an Hour, which used PowerPoint. Still in America, the main chunk of the theater audience is gonna be older white people. I knew that if I just did a show in a theater about race, you're gonna get a lot of older white people show up who are also going to think that they're not on trial here, which I was like, no, you're on trial here. And I also wanted some of the comedy club audience, which is more diverse and also more willing to laugh. But I also wanted the theater audiences I was thinking. And I didn't want to do a show about racism that was a black guy talking to a group of mostly white people.
Yeah.
So I was like, what can I do to get a better audience and also a racially diverse audience? Well, bring a friend of a different race, get in 2 for 1. And it immediately changed who was in the audience. From the very first night of the show, it was one of the blackest and most mixed audiences I'd ever seen in a theater. I would say something, only the black people would laugh. And the white people would look and I'd be like, white people, look at the black people.
Yeah.
They're laughing. So that means that the thing I'm saying has some level of truth, even if you don't agree. Or sometimes what happened, everybody would laugh, and you'd point that out. I mean, it was very quickly, I was like, this is the best work I've ever done. It's not even close.
Yeah.
I don't know where this goes, but I'm gonna keep doing it.
It's so cool to force people to either realize that they don't have any friends of another race.
Yep, which is great.
Or to reach out to that one friend they have.
And it's fun now because there's not really, the stakes are pretty low.
Yeah.
The stakes are just did I have a good show?
But I don't think the stakes of what you're doing are low, actually. So let's talk about United Shades. Yeah. So you just finished season 6, and that's 47 episodes. That's 47 locations. And what you do is you go around and have these painfully awkward, hopefully productive conversations with people that we don't know. I don't know anybody except for you that's going around doing what you're doing, which is wanting to know more rather than tell more. So can you talk about the actual thesis of the show?
The show was pitched CNN without talent attached. The working title was Black Man, White America. So a black comedian would travel in the country talking to white people. I said in the meeting I had with CNN, yeah, I wouldn't do that, which at the time, I'm gonna go on TV and just talk to white people? It just seems so something that MTV would have done in the 90s.
That moment had passed.
Yeah, that moment had passed. The moment of race being about black and white was long past, even if the rest of the country didn't recognize it. We can't just act like racism is about black and white. It blunts the conversation and stymies any progress. The pilot episode is very black and white. It's me talking to the KKK, which was 100% my idea. So I just want to be clear about that. The guy who doesn't want to just have the black and white conversation goes, well, if we're gonna have it, let's really do it in a way that I haven't seen on TV before. But I very quickly realized I don't want to just be the guy who talks to people who are gonna kill him every week. A lot of people still think the show is basically that, and I'm like, no, I've really gotten way too much credit for that.
I mean, it was so striking. I'm sure it looms so large in everyone's imagination.
It
but
does.
You've talked to like a couple of trans kids who are in the Mormon church. I thought that was really moving. You talked to this beautiful, older OBGYN, anti-abortion activist in Mississippi.
Yeah.
And the way that you're talking to them, I feel like allows for so much ambiguity and complexity that actually isn't at home on a stand-up stage.
The episode that I learned the most from was the episode about inmates at San Quentin. That was the one where I walked in having a lot of preconceived notions. I was really aware that I didn't want to make the thing I'd seen on TV where it's like, look at how scary people in prison are. Because I knew it was gonna be a lot of black men. I don't want to accidentally get caught up in making that. San Quentin's a lot about rehabilitation. I didn't really know that. And then you can see the moment in the episode where I sort of had this like, oh, this is different than I expected. The junior warden asked me, he's like, so what do you think about the prison? We had just walked into the prison. We just got to the yard, which is the same as it exists in every movie. And he goes, how's it feel so far? And I was like, well, it kind of feels like a neighborhood that I'm unfamiliar with, which I was really soft selling. And then one of the dudes shouts out, love your comedy, bro. I was like, oh, this is great. Yeah. So in that moment, it made me relax immediately, and it changed the way the conversations happened.
My name's Kamau. Duck. So tell me, what would you say is the biggest surprise, would you think that would surprise people on the outside about being in San Quentin?
The name itself is not the characters that it produces anymore.
Yeah.
They actually produces positive people now. You know?
Yes.
You know, they make us think that we are still part of some sort of humanity.
When I went back to screen the episode there, which is the most intense screening I ever had, and remember that nervous before screening, when it was over, they all stood up and clapped because they had just never seen themselves on, like, they never seen themselves as they see themselves on TV. Yeah, so it was like, I really walked away sort of having a very different image of mass incarceration. I have never talked to so many adult black men about therapy in my life. They all said I'm here for the thing I did. Now they will sort of go, I don't know if I should be in jail for the rest of my life over this thing. And they would tell you the crime, and you'd be like, nobody got killed, you didn't have a gun.
Right.
A crime happened, but the rest of your life?
Right.
And I think that, like, you know, San Quentin does a great job of rehabilitating people, but unfortunately, California and the country does not do a great job of recognizing when people have been rehabilitated, because no politician wants to say, I have paroled more people from prison than any governor in the history of this state. Like, that's not a talking point, whether you're a Democrat or a Republican.
Who's a person you wish everybody in America could sit down and talk to?
Standing Rock did not allow a lot of media in there. I feel super fortunate that I sat down with Tara Huska, and she just sort of sat there lovingly entertaining all the dumb questions that people have about indigenous folks in this land, and we laughed about it a lot. Like, I feel like that Standing Rock thing is like, when I think about it, I get like goosebumps. Like, it was a specific moment in time, and the show was able to go there. And if you watch the show, you will know something about Standing Rock that you can't get from just reading about it. So I think that the thing that I'm able to do on CNN comes in large part from being an only child who moved around a lot.
You were raised by this pretty beautiful, charismatic woman who took you from Indianapolis to Boston to Chicago?
But I moved to Alabama, and I stayed for 2.5 years, and then went back to Chicago. But still, like, if there's any one place in the country that I go back to as home, it's Alabama.
So how did your mom orient you in the world? Like, didn't she used to go to your classes and give little presentations about Africa when you would move to a new school?
She did that in Boston. Like, she just was very, I mean, we're talking about late 70s, early 80s. So there's all the talk around, like, whatever we've gone through in the country right now of, like, Black Lives Matter and we need to represent. There was no such word as representation unless it was, like, your lawyer. So my mom would, like, ask, like, well, you know, do you teach Afro-American history? Do you talk about Africa? And when the answer was no, 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 she would just make it her place to, like, go do those things. And so I have very big memories of my mom bringing in, like, a slide projector. Like, we're talking, I'm so old. A slide projector and, like, turning the lights off, and she's showing slides of, like, her trip to Kenya, and I'm just like, oh, this is so embarrassing.
Was it? I mean, did it?
Yeah, it's embarrassing.
Were you like the guy with the funny name whose mom came in and did the slideshow about Africa?
I guess I was. Yeah. I mean, I definitely.
Are you just realizing that now?
No, I mean, I guess, yeah. I mean, I was. I mean, our relationship was so close that I was not the kid who was just genuinely embarrassed of his mom. Like, we were really close. And, like, she was my best friend. I would have said, who's your best friend? My mom was my best friend. So, yeah, that's mama's boy.
Okay, so you're this mama's boy, but then you left her to go live in Alabama with your dad, you big meanie. That must have broken her heart.
She says that she knew I would be back. And also my dad just had very different parameters of what a kid should do that my mom just didn't have. So it was very different. Like, you know, my dad was like, I don't know about that movie, it's PG-13. Meanwhile, with my mom, I'm watching like Eddie Murphy Delirious, you know? So it was just like, it was very different.
Your dad's such an interesting guy because he was kind of unemployed and then underemployed. And then at 35 or something, he decided that he was going to change gears and go work for a bank at the bottom of the ladder.
He just sort of like realized he was going nowhere, and he is a super smart person and can work hard. And I think he probably looked up and he was and was just like, wait, what am I doing with my life? And just completely went from like bohemian black hippie and was like, I need to like clean this up. And I understand that because I think I did something like that at a similar time in my life, but I still stayed in the lane that I had sort of walked in, which is the showbiz lane. And he is now absolutely, and has been for 30 years, a pillar of the community in Mobile, Alabama. He was the insurance commissioner for the state of Alabama.
Okay, so you go to college, you're super into martial arts and Bruce Lee. You're gonna major
so I go to an Ivy League school.
Ivy League school for East Asian Studies. You're taking Mandarin, and you drop out.
Yes.
What happened?
I think I picked the wrong school. I think that was like,
Where were you?
University of Pennsylvania. And really, I should have probably been at like, I don't know, Oberlin or something. One of those places where you get to like design your major. I think I would have stayed if I'd been at like Reed College, where you're like, I give myself an A, you know? So, I dropped out of college, came home.
What did Janet think when you dropped out of college?
My mom says she remembers when I talked about dropping out that she was worried about me. I said something like, things always work out for me. Like, I was just like, it's gonna work out somehow.
Do you believe that? Like, are you that much of an optimist?
I'm not a pessimist, but I am a person who looks at what's going on and sort of like realistically assesses the situation. But I do believe I can figure something out in any situation.
This takes me to this really beautiful piece that you wrote for Vanity Fair about what it's like to move around the world in your body.
Yes.
And you said, I don't engage in any type of behavior that should place me in a cop's crosshairs. But the fact that I'm not involved in any of that stuff doesn't leave me any more confident I won't be killed. That's because I've been endowed with the triple crown of being killed for no good reason. Big, black, male.
I mean, I literally yesterday, I left my house to take a walk and it was raining a little bit and I had a hoodie on and I started to put the hoodie up and I was like, I had a thought of like, and it's raining. And that's sort of the ridiculousness of this sort of knowing where you fit in the outside world. I was like, should I just let myself get rained on? like, maybe I should just get rained on. I'm already cutting a certain path through the world. If I put the hood up, that's another layer. So it didn't stop me from taking a walk. So it's not like at that level,
right.
But it does make me think about how I move through the world so that if something does happen, I can sort of hopefully figure out my way through it because I was at least aware that it was a possibility.
Yeah. So you said that comedy is an art form that's worth our time and attention and studying. And I totally...
Did I literally say that?
No, yeah.
I believe that. I mean, I think if you look at the history of America since the modern era of stand-up comedy, you can't really think about Black people's experience in the 70s and early 80s without thinking about Richard Pryor.
Yeah.
You know, you can't think about like Joan Rivers going on TV pregnant but not being able to talk about it is saying something about America. George Carlin logged 50 years of America.
And who were you obsessed with?
You know, Eddie Murphy was 19 on SNL, and I was like, I don't know when he was on, I was like 8 or 9, but I felt like we were probably the same age.
So Tell Me More has this little segment that we call Plus One. It's basically a way for you to give a shout out to somebody who's been super important to you or inspiring or supportive. And it's our way of reminding everyone that people don't get where they're going alone and that we have big effect on one another. So can you tell us about your friend, Dwayne?
Every comedy scene has its playground legends. So Dwayne is maybe one of the playground legends of comedy. Like many comedians from like Chris Rock and Mark Maron to every open micer in Chicago go, that guy's so funny. I just happened to have met him at a point where he was getting back into stand-up. He came into an open mic in Chicago. Nobody knew who he was. It's a tiny open mic. 10 performers who were performing and like 12 people in the audience, you know. And he did this joke about Jesus's bitter brother, Steve Christ, which just like leveled the place. And then he's like, that's it. And he walked off stage. We're like, who the heck is that guy? And then we became friends. And even though I was not funny at all, and I could see the look in people's faces when Dwayne would show up with me, Dwayne just sort of like took me under his wing.
This is what he had to say about you.
When I met Kamau, I was getting back into comedy, and he was 2 weeks into comedy. So, you know, at that point, you're still searching. Heck, I'm still searching, but, you know, now. But I just like the way his mind worked, just to talk to him, man. He just has an interesting way of thinking. I said, oh, man, I like this brother. Just, like I said, I like his manner and his, you know, his nature, and just, yeah, he just has an interesting way of thinking. When he first started, man, he had some funny jokes, but it was just, I won't say fluff or frivolous, but they were fluffy and frivolous. This is gonna embarrass him, but he used to have this joke about this dating this blow-up doll. And he's like, oh, baby, this gonna be good, and then just pumping up this thing. I think 97 or 98, he left Chicago, and then he went to, that's when he moved to San Francisco. And I remember he came back to do a show, and you could tell, you know, just the nature of what he's talking about had changed. He was just starting to talk about some kind of substantial things, you know, giving things more gravity, you know. Moving to San Francisco really helped him develop as a comedian.
He's being very generous. And when I came back a year to Chicago, he's right that I moved specifically to San Francisco because I had learned that's where comedians find their voices without the pressures of show business.
And April Fool's Day 2003, you met Melissa. How'd it go? Like, tell us your love story.
I met Melissa at the Shelton Theater, tiny theater in San Francisco. Her friend Jill was there to perform her solo show. She had hired Melissa to do lights and sound. My friend Bruce Packman was like a local independent theater producer who had like produced Jill's show. And he basically told Jill, you should hire Kamau, he's a good director. She would drive me home after tech rehearsal every night, even though she was going across the bay to Berkeley where she lived, and I lived in the inner Sunset, so it was like she would drive me home and it was completely not convenient, even a little bit. So,
So you know. And she's a dancer with a doctorate? She's PhD?
She's got a PhD in critical dance studies and an MFA in experimental dance choreography. She did a lot for me as a performer, because she's a dancer, so it's a lot about movement. So she noticed that I would like sort of shuffle my feet a lot. And she was like, stop shuffling your feet, just stand there. So now when I think about movement, it's because she's like, if you're gonna move, move, but if not, just stand there. So I became more serious and more thoughtful. It sort of leaned into the better parts of myself after I met her.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
It's a nice tribute to her.
Mm-hmm.
So you live in this bastion of liberal thought, Berkeley, California.
At the time.
At the time. And you're walking down this cute little street, College Avenue, and your wife is sitting with some of her buddies having like a salad bowl of latte at a cafe, and you approach. So pick up the story from there.
It was my birthday. We'd had breakfast at the cafe. My wife went off for a new moms group meeting. I went down the street to another cafe that I felt more comfortable at, because this one was not, I didn't feel comfortable sitting there for hours writing. It was not that cafe. On my way back, there's a bookstore that's attached to the cafe called Mrs. Dalloway's. I see a book in the window about the loving couple, a children's book about the loving couple, the couple that legalized interracial marriage. I buy that book for my family because that's about my family. And I sort of bop over to the cafe, holding my computer in my hand, holding this book. There's 5 white-looking women. They're not all white, but that's not how whiteness works. And one of them asks to see the book. I show the book. All of a sudden, I hear on the window, dun, 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 dun. And I look up, and because I'm a semi-celebrity in the Bay Area, I look up like, yeah, it's the guy from the TV. It sure is. And this woman is like, howdy. And I immediately confused and shocked, and then realizing, it's racism. As I'm standing there, Melissa sees me. She didn't see the woman do this, but she heard it because it was very loud. She sees me. She has been around me long enough to know that racism just went down. An employee walks out of the cafe to sort of give me the like, all right, sir. Melissa's like, this is my husband. That's my wife. That's my baby she's holding. Oh, we thought you were selling something. And I stormed off, like, sort of like, Melissa's like, no, don't go. I'm going with you. We get up, we go to the car. I take the baby, strap the baby into the car seat. And Melissa goes back because I have to say something and gets and goes to the employee who'd walked outside and just sort of like, rah, 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 in a way that it is safe for a white woman to do, and it is not safe for a black man to do that. And this is in the height of like Ferguson, Michael Brown's to the news every day. So it was like, I was very aware that like also, I can't make too big a deal about this because there is real happening. But also, if this is happening to me, it's happening to other people. So we
So you're just heart pounding, like we just
yeah, because it's it's an adrenaline dump. You just feel like it's the fight or flight thing. And also, I'm totally aware of who I am in the world, big black guy. These are all little white women coffee shop employees. It's like I was aware that as Melissa was like reading this woman for filth, I can't even stand behind her in support because I'm the big black guy who's lumbering over her. So I just sort of took our baby to the car and just sort of strapped her in and looked at her while it was happening over here.
When the thing happened at the cafe, you said it's kind of hard to know what you want in that moment. But then you did actually come up with something that you wanted.
Like if I knew then what I know now, I probably would have wanted a different thing. But in that moment, there was really a sense of like, I can't brush this off.
Yeah.
And I can't just make this about me. I'm not offended as a famous person.
Right.
I'm offended for all the black folks and Latinx folks and indigenous folks who don't have a platform.
So what'd you guys do?
It was a public event that was free. The media caught wind of it. They showed up. We kept the media out of it. Again, it was right in the middle of all the Ferguson things, and it was just like, I don't want to act like this is the worst thing that has ever happened to a black person.
Right.
Because it's not the worst thing that happened to a black person that day.
Right.
But it is a problem in the community.
Right, and it is a teachable moment.
And it's also a problem in a city, specifically Berkeley, that claims to be this progressive bastion.
I know.
And gets the reputation around the country as being that, when those of us who live in that area are like, it ain't that progressive. One day, me and Sammy, my oldest daughter, were walking down the street, run into a friend of mine. Somehow the Elma Cafe comes up, which regularly comes up, and this was several years later. And I told her the story, the kid version story. Dad, I got kicked out, Mama was there, da-da-da. And she said, why? And I said, racism.
Yeah.
And so she's like, that doesn't make any sense. I was like, yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
Anyway, let's get some ice cream.
Do you resent having to have those conversations?
No, I always compare it to like, it'd be like a parent not telling your kid about fire being hot. You're not shielding
it's a requirement.
It's a requirement, and I think that that's another thing. White parents...
And it should be a requirement for white parents, too.
Yes, and white parents often think it's an option.
Okay, so we have a speed round, and tell me more.
Great.
What's your guilty pleasure?
Watching ridiculous nonsense on YouTube. I was really into Dr. Pimple Popper for a while.
You just won that question. No one has a pleasure that they should be more guilty about than watching pimples being popped on the internet. What's your go-to mantra for hard times?
Whose idea was this?
When was the last time you cried?
So there's an episode of United Shades that is about, a large part about defund the police. There's a section about a young man named Elijah McClain who was walking down the street in Aurora, Colorado. Somebody called the cops because he was a black guy walking down the street dancing. He was sort of in his own head. The cops showed up, restrained him. He was injected with ketamine, and then he died in the hospital 3 days later. And the story is all about how he was just a unique kid dancing to the beat of his own drum, and I was that kid. And every time I watch it, even though I made the show, we put it together, it all came together, it makes me cry every time.
If your mother wrote a book about you, what would it be called?
I Made This.
And lastly, if you could say 4 words to anyone, who would you address and what would you say?
It's to my 3 daughters. Always believe in yourself.
So if you're pulling way back and you think about all the books like Caste and Abraham Kendi and movies and docs and changing statutes and protests and legislation and voter rights.
And reparations.
Is it working? Like, are we getting anywhere from your point of view?
I think there is a portion of the country who doesn't even have their own best interests at heart. But I think there are people where you cannot try to win these people over. That's a deeper issue, because I'm not trying to win the hearts and minds of everybody. I'm trying to be clear about this. I'm trying to win the hearts and minds of the people who have good faith in wanting their hearts and minds won.
Thank you. So good to talk to you.
It's good to talk to you.
Major funding for Tell Me More with Kelly Corrigan is provided by the Penner Family Foundation, along with support from the Gordon and Laura Gund Foundation. Major funding for Tell Me More with Kelly Corrigan is provided by the Penner Family Foundation, along with support from the Gordon and Laura Gund Foundation.
It was a time of, kind of the early part of terrorism against Americans in the Middle East. The worst incident was the bombing of the Marine barracks. I think 300 Marines were killed in this huge truck bomb in Beirut. My dad, I remember he was in his office, which was, on campus 5 miles away, 6 miles away, and he said he heard this enormous blast and felt the impact of it 5 miles away. And the embassy cleared out, but the university was still functioning. So my dad became one of the most prominent Americans remaining, and so he became a target.
One life can hold a lot. Playing soccer in the streets of Cairo. Taking a pass from Michael Jordan to make the shot that wins the championship. Taking a call at 3 a.m. to learn that your father's been shot dead in the hall outside his office. Watching a president thank your mother, or another president salute your team, or another president call you a scared little boy. Now, when you ask someone with this much life experience for his thoughts, you shouldn't be surprised when he gives you a real answer. I'm Kelly Corrigan, this is Tell Me More, and here is my conversation with player, coach, and citizen, Steve Kerr. We go to Warriors games, and often we go an hour and a half early just to watch you guys warm up. Like, there's something really magical about people's routines. And you are sort of famous for having a really great pre-warm-up routine, like that you put yourself through a lot of paces.
I think most players in the NBA, once they kind of figure out what they're doing, they develop a routine. There's something very comforting in having a daily ritual that you go through. And you develop it as you go, as you learn different drills, you learn different ideas. So you kind of develop your own unique warm-up and routine. And then I think it's really important kind of to feel prepared, to feel ready.
Yeah, it's like actors talk about what it feels like to put on the clothes of their character and tie the shoes and stuff. Like there is this way of stepping into yourself and convincing yourself maybe that you can do this kind of crazy thing that you're doing.
Yeah. I think that was definitely the case early on. I had a little bit of imposter syndrome while I was out there.
Sure.
I did not have a natural born confidence. It was sort of an upset that I even made it to the NBA, really. I didn't have a scholarship offer coming out of high school. I wasn't supposed to play in the NBA, and so when it happened, I had to kind of convince myself that I belong. I would literally picture myself in other players' shoes. I could be like that guy, or I could be like that guy. And there weren't that many guys I could be like, unfortunately.
Do you still love basketball?
Oh, yeah, it's my life. I mean, it's my whole career. And there's something really pleasing about making a shot. The ball goes through the net, and it's the sound of the shoes squeaking on the floor, and I just fell in love with it right away.
You used to play with your dad in the driveway.
Mm-hmm. We used to go to UCLA games. That's where I fell in love with the game. My dad was a professor at UCLA, and that was when UCLA was in their heyday. John Wooden was coaching. They were winning national championships every year, and so I remember my first trip to Pauley Pavilion. Sold out, band is playing, players are running out onto the floor, and I'm 5 years old, and I walked in, I was like, oh my God, this is heaven. Yeah, this is what I want to do, yeah.
When you were playing for the Bulls, somebody said that things got better just when you stepped on the court because you were just enough of a threat that the defense had to do something about you being there, that they couldn't just completely cover Jordan and Pippen. How did you think about yourself in terms of what value you could add to that team?
Chicago was where I actually felt like, okay, I belong. It was my 5th season. I had bounced around a little bit before that. I found a great role playing for Phil Jackson and Tex Winter in their offense. It was a perfect fit for me, the triangle offense. And then playing with Jordan and Pippen, 2 of the greatest players ever. It was an amazing ride to play on that team.
Even though Jordan's sort of famously hot-headed.
No, that was all part of it. The NBA basketball competition is as intense as any competition in the world.
Yeah.
And if you're in the NBA, you come to realize quickly it's about winning. The intimidating tactics from Michael were all part of it. And it didn't bother those of us who could handle it, but that was part of Michael's strategy. He felt like if you couldn't handle that in practice, you weren't going to handle the pressure of a playoff game.
Do you yell at your players?
Not often.
So you don't think it's effective for your team now?
It's different now. It is important that my team knows I can go off the handle once in a while.
I feel like that about parenting.
Right? It is. It's
my
like,
father-in-law used to say, get your bluff in early. Like, give them bring down the hammer once and they won't do it.
No, I totally agree. I think, one of the reasons I loved Phil Jackson and Greg Popovich so much is they reminded me of my dad, because there was like this unconditional love and yet tiny little bit of fear. Like I didn't want to disappoint them.
Yeah.
And they carried a big stick. So I think it is like being a good parent. If you don't sort of drop that hammer once in a while, then you're going to lose your authority.
So you're a person who's given a lot of thought to culture. What was the culture like at the Bulls?
It was an amazing culture built by Phil Jackson. He was a genius coach. I think what I found was with Phil, he was really unique. He was very different. He incorporated a lot of Native American storytelling and art and wisdom in his coaching. He was the first coach I'd ever had who had the internal confidence and background to do stuff like that. It was really authentic from Phil. He believed in meditation. He believed in spirituality as a team. He called us his tribe. So you actually felt like you were part of a tribe. You felt like you were part of a community. And you had this quest, you had this goal to win a championship.
Yeah.
And it's beautiful to walk into that gym every day with the guys on this journey. It's an amazing time.
Do you love Michael Jordan?
Love Michael Jordan. Are you kidding me?
Like you guys would just have a big old time if you went to.
Yeah. So like we see each other once every year or two, maybe at the All-Star game. And it's an immediate talk about the old days and how's Scotty doing, how's Luke Longley doing, and it's a very small little club. Like, yeah, we were NBA champions.
And you two have this very small little moment. He gave you this pass at the very end of the NBA Finals. Yeah. Did you want it?
I convinced myself that I wanted it. Honestly, like early in my career, I was afraid of missing the last shot. When that game happened and that play happened, I was telling myself, you're going to get it, let it go. You just let it fly, let it fly.
What does that feel like? The place just went on bananas.
Yeah, it's indescribable. To make a shot of that importance in the NBA Finals and the home crowd going crazy. It was the seminal moment of my career. It was kind of, in my own mind, sort of validated my place in the league. But I did that a million times in my driveway, and so to actually experience that in the NBA Finals was incredible.
Tell me about your dad.
Oh, man. It's kind of hard for me to talk about still.
Malcolm Kerr, president of the American University of Beirut, was murdered at close range outside his campus office by two men with a silencer-equipped pistol.
He was a wonderful man. Quiet, very funny, great way with people. He was just an amazing dad who was there for all four of us throughout our childhood, and we were just unbelievably lucky to have him.
Your dad's dream job was to be the president of the American University in Beirut.
It was his dream job. He grew up in Beirut
Yeah.
and went to the university.
And you met your mom there, and
Yeah,
you
he met
guys
my
had a whole
mom.
childhood
Yeah,
there.
yeah, and I just think it was too big of a pull for both my dad and my mom.
Even though the person who had done it right before him had been kidnapped, and embassies had been bombed, and barracks had been bombed. Why do you think they assassinated him?
He was the most prominent American in Beirut at that time, and it was the early part of terrorism against Americans in the Middle East. So you remember the Iran hostage situation was 1979. The worst incident was the bombing of the Marine barracks. I think 300 Marines were killed in this huge truck bomb in Beirut. My dad, I remember he was in his office, which was, on campus 5 miles away, 6 miles away, and he said he heard this enormous blast and felt the impact of it 5 miles away. And the embassy cleared out, but the university was still functioning. So my dad became one of the most prominent Americans remaining, and so he became a target. I think he took that job when I was 16.
Mm-hmm.
When you're 16, your dad's not going to die. Your mom's not going to die. Like, everything's going to be fine. If you've lived a life like I did, where perfect upbringing, wonderful family, and got everything you need, nothing's going to happen to you. That happens to other people, And so looking back, sometimes I think I wish I'd been a little wiser in terms of maybe bringing all that stuff up.
Tell me about the last time you saw him. Didn't he come see you at college?
Yeah, last time I saw him was on campus. We spent the weekend together and, went to the football game, and he slept in my dorm. He watched me practice. It was a weekend visit, and I thought there'll be another one of those soon. And a couple months after that was when he was killed.
And somebody called you in your dorm room, and were you by yourself?
I was by myself, probably 3 o'clock in the morning. And somebody from the university called me, a family friend, to tell me the news.
I sort of can't believe someone didn't come to your door. Like, what did you do when you hung up?
I went outside and started crying and walking the streets, didn't know what to do, and finally went back to my dorm, and one of my coaches came to the room. I think we went out and went to a diner or something and just sat in a diner and talked. It was obviously a terrible night.
But a night where you learned how important a coach can be in a person's life.
Yeah. And that was kind of my salvation, was the team and playing basketball and being able to be around all my guys.
So this team thing is kind of interesting when you look at the difference between the NBA when you joined and where it is today, because it's a little harder to hold a team together and have this set of people that become family to each other. Do you think that the business for an individual of being a professional athlete is kind of at odds with the beauty that sports can offer a person?
It is. It's one of the most difficult things to do as a coach in the NBA, is convince your players to commit to the greater good, and at the same time, oh, by the way, we might cut you or trade you at any moment.
Or you might get fired.
Or I could get fired and you have a new coach. And so there's kind of this contract that you sign, like a metaphorical contract that you sign when you get to the NBA, where you understand it. The rewards are enormous. You know, you can make more money than you'll ever make in your life, and you could have incredible glory and joy. And the flip side is you could get hurt, you could get booed, you could get cut, you could get traded. So it's a really sort of bizarre little world that we live in.
I mean, I feel like everybody has this new work that's been assigned to them by social media, which is to be a gatekeeper of your own mind. Like, what are you letting in and what are you blocking out?
Athletes today have it harder than we ever had it by far. I walk in at halftime, and every coach in the NBA, every guy's on his phone.
Really?
Yeah. The danger is you have all that judgment and criticism at your fingertips. And I don't know how to survive in that bubble with all that criticism and judgment and anger coming at you all the time and still be able to function and play at a high level. It's incredible.
You know, I write books and they say, like, never read the bad stuff and never read the good stuff.
Yeah.
Like, actually, both sides are problematic because they're so weighted with judgment.
Yeah. I quit Twitter maybe 5 months ago. Thank you. It's a huge achievement.
Wow.
Yeah.
Let's all
I did it with James Wiseman, our rookie. You know, he was having a rough season and he was taking some criticism. And I asked him, "Are you reading stuff?" And he goes, "Yeah." And I said, "How's it feel?" He goes, "Feels lousy." So I said to James, "What do you think? Let's quit together." So we did it, and I just realized I don't need this. I think this is actually much healthier. But I also understand I'm probably neglecting some of my duty as a citizen to make people aware of what's happening out there.
In that year, the 73 year, the bad back year, shortly after the season, there was a shooter who went to UCLA. It's like half a mile from your mom. And then shortly after that, the Pulse shooting happened. And you made a big statement. Do you remember it?
Yeah, and the reason I made it is because we had done probably 3 moments of silence during that season. It was like every couple of weeks, we're just, let's take a bow and stay silent and not actually try to solve the problem. And so I just felt like, I do have a platform. I should probably say something. And I've been an advocate ever since. Because my dad died that way, and because it's such an enormous problem in our country, that's become my sort of pet project.
Do you have hope that there'll be new legislation?
I do have hope, mainly because of the March for Our Lives kids. There's so many young people now who are so angry and invested. What makes me lose hope is just that it's a constant deal with the Senate where, the House passes H.R. 8, which is, background checks bill that 90% of Americans want background checks, regardless if you're a Democrat or Republican, 90%.
People in the NRA want background checks.
Yeah, but the Senate will not go down that path. They won't even look at the bill because of partisan politics, and they put their own private career ahead of the lives of American people.
We have a thing at Tell Me More, which is asking each guest to point to someone who's been an inspiration to them or has helped shape their thinking in an important way. And you picked a guy named Pastor Mike. Tell us about him.
Pastor Mike McBride, incredible human being. He's a pastor in Oakland who does a lot of work for gun violence prevention. Oakland reduced gun violence by 50%. And it was through this program that Pastor Mike was leading. And what the program was, it was gathering together all of the people that would be involved in terms of gun violence and repercussions. Gang members, policemen, community leaders. You get them all in a room and you get everybody talking. It's like anything else, whether it's a team or a classroom or whatever, like you start to listen and you start to learn. And so Pastor Mike, he's very unique because he's got so much charisma and wisdom.
So we went and met with him and asked him a few questions.
You did?
We did. And here's one of our favorite clips.
When I was a youth minister in San Jose in 1999, I was physically and sexually assaulted by 2 police officers in San Jose Police Department. I was speaking to my youth church that I led, and many of them told me this happens to me all the time. I said, well, why didn't you say anything to me? And one of the young people said, we did not believe that this part of our lives was something we could bring to the church. And in that moment, I heard God speak to me and say, what kind of ministry are you developing where these children and their parents will trust you with the salvation of their souls, but not the safety of their bodies? I'm the fourth of 5 generations of pastors, preachers, ministers, music artists, and singers who've grown up in the church. I met Steve Kerr at an event that Giffords and Live Free were co-sponsoring. He's a good brother. I really appreciate his curiosity. You know, he really wrestles hard with the conversations we have, and he takes action. He literally took parts of our conversation back and helped to organize the NBA coaches around racial justice. I had told Steve about an event we were doing where young people in East Oakland were rallying to remove police officers from school so they could have the money used for more counselors. Steve literally left his practice in San Francisco, rushed over to the deep East Oakland and stood in a press conference with us. And that next week, the school district voted to remove police in schools. And Steve was there with the young people, taking pictures, speaking, encouraging them to continue to use their voice for positive and social change. For me, is an example of what we all need to do.
That's awesome.
I know.
We've gotten really tight, and what I remember about when the school district in Oakland decided, all right, we're not going to have, you know, a police force in the schools anymore. It became kind of a political hot button topic because the phrase defund the police was applied to that. And it was a good reminder to me that everything these days is sort of glorified and distorted. And because what this case was about was removing police force from a school and instead spending that money on guidance counselors. What do you think is more important for these kids? Can you imagine going to school with policemen all over the place? You think that would be healthy? And just going out to the community and hearing the people talk, the students, the teachers, like, yeah. And I think if most people had gone out there, they would have gone, oh, yeah, that makes perfect sense. But that's the whole point of, as Mike said, just getting into the community and listening and taking part. You just sort of realize what's real and what isn't.
A weird thing about your job is that it's super crazy important when you're doing it, but then when you step outside of it, you yourself have said it's bullshit.
Yeah.
It's all bullshit. You said that.
It is. It's kind of bullshit. I always wrestle with that. Like, how important is it? Of course it's important, right? But it's a basketball game. And that really came from my family first and from our upbringing. We spent many years living overseas. We traveled the world, saw all these different cultures, saw a lot of people really, you know, struggling, and saw how lucky we were. And then to have these amazing coaches who were constantly preaching perspective. Greg Popovich, you know, my next coach in San Antonio, he'd just walk in to practice one day and we're getting ready to practice. And any of you guys see what's going on in Syria? And, you know, everyone's like, he's like, no, all you're worried is about that little ball going through the hoop. Is that the only thing that's in your life? He had this great way of, like, you know, kind of needling us and nudging us to learn and see what's happening around the world and take part in it. And so that's the trick as a coach, is to provide that perspective where you're getting your players to work as hard as they possibly can. And yet you have to also remove some of the importance of it, because by taking some of the importance away, it sort of humanizes everybody and it gives you perspective, and it's a little easier to deal with the ups and downs.
You love a locker room.
Yeah, locker room.
That's what they say that players dream about when it's all over. Is that true for you?
Yeah, that's what players miss. You know, they don't miss the games. They miss the locker room. They miss the bus. They miss the camaraderie. There's nothing like it. The barbs, the jabs, the trash talking, mixed with this quest to win and the joy of winning and the devastation of losing and all of that. And you go through everything together. It's an incredible bond. And then when you retire, you just miss that interaction. That first year, life is quiet. You know, it's quiet. Being in a locker room and in a bus with guys all the time. Most people don't have
live like that.
Yeah. And so when you do live like that, it's really hard to suddenly be alone.
When you were a broadcaster with TNT, you were always dropping in on other people's practices and taking notes.
My last few years of broadcasting, I was preparing to coach. And so I was literally taking notes. And from these guys who were great coaches in the league, I was able to build my plan for how I wanted to coach.
How close were you? Like, you know, sometimes when things are on paper, they seem one way, and then once you get into the arena, whatever it may be, things are slightly different. Like, how useful were your notes?
The first year, I had this whole plan that I had written out, and I'm like, I've never actually tried any of this, so I, you know, I hope it works. But everything clicked.
Yeah, it sure did.
It was. I've had a lot of great years in my life. It's probably the most fun year of my entire life. Even more fun than being a player, because when I was a player, I beat myself up all the time. So seasons were difficult. They were exhausting. I still beat myself up if I coach a bad game or something, but it's different. I feel more at ease with myself.
And maybe it's just more pleasant to have it be about them and not you.
Yeah.
You know?
And I never thought of it this way, but maybe because I beat myself up over my whole performance, my entire life, maybe it was just a relief to actually focus on somebody else.
Yeah.
You just nailed it.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So we have a little speed round here.
Okay.
Tell me more.
Okay.
Let's see how you do. If I looked at your Spotify playlist, what would be the most played?
Counting Crows.
What's your go-to mantra for hard times?
Carry On. There's a great song by the band Fun.
That's so good.
You know that song,
Yeah.
Carry On? That's, yeah.
If your mother wrote a book about you, what would it be called?
Steve is great, but you should meet my other 3 children.
If your high school did superlatives, what would you have been most likely to become?
Most likely to become a high school basketball coach.
Very close to what you ended up being.
Yeah.
You've met 5 presidents. Looking back over all 46, do you have a favorite?
President Obama. We actually played golf together about a month ago, and it was one of the great days of my life.
Who won?
He won the front, I won the back.
That's nice.
Yeah.
That's nice.
Yeah, it all worked out well.
Thank you,
Thank you,
so
Kelly.
much. How lucky are we that Steve Kerr is our basketball coach? I mean, he's just the best. Speaking of Steve's, so this is a labor of love for many people, but the 3 people that I work with the most, the 3 people that are working on this the most are Melissa Williams. Stand up. Like, if you need something done, call Melissa Williams, except she's busy right now. And Steve Goldbloom. This is Steve Goldbloom. So take a seat. Oh, jeez.
I've been walking around with it all day.
Thank you. Thank you. So, Steve,
yeah.
have you guys seen Brief but Spectacular? It's on the NewsHour every Thursday. So this is Steve's production. He's been doing it for 7 years.
Yeah.
There's almost 400 of them.
Yeah.
They were nominated for an Emmy.
Yep. Yeah.
And then he also did this super cool movie with Rita Moreno, who I know was just here last week for an event called Remember Me, which you wrote and directed
Yeah.
and starred in.
Well, I played her grandson. She was the star, but
Right, yeah, you didn't, nobody stars with
Nobody
Rita
stars,
Moreno.
yeah.
Yeah, sorry. So basically we're gonna do a Q&A with you guys, but I'll get it started. So be thinking and you can ask anything you want, of course. So,
Thank you, by the way. What a pleasure to watch this with people. I've just seen this on my laptop alone in my bedroom where I've been working over the last year and a half. So it's kind of amazing.
I like it big.
I just got in the back row and was watching people like their shoulders moving. It's a privilege. And Michael and KQED, thank you for having us because this is just an incredible facility.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah.
It's amazing. What was the hardest one to do? We've done 13. We did 3 last fall, Brian Stevenson, Jen Garner, and James Corden, and then 10.
Yeah.
What was the hardest? What was your favorite?
Hardest and the favorite? I feel like the hardest part is just getting the show off the ground, right? It's always, but I mean, Kelly is a force of nature and gets it done, and I've learned a lot from watching you. Technically, the hardest was we do a lot of scouting where we shoot these. We shot I-Jen Poo, who is extraordinary, coming out soon, all about sort of rethinking our relationship with domestic workers and rewriting laws. But we happened to shoot that off a train station, like next to a train track, and it was kind of this just
Horrific.
Yeah, it was one of the worst interview moments that I've ever had in my producing
We were
career.
doing makeup, and like, you know, it doesn't take that long to put my face together, and a train would go by, and it was so loud and rattly, like the windows would shake, and then I just kind of glanced over at Steve.
We would get 6 minutes of content with these. It was like 20-minute trains that would come
20
by.
minutes. I was telling jokes. Like, while the trains would go by, I'd be like, all right.
I had to tell you to stop doing that because we had to get in.
Get back in
We
the
really
zone.
had to stay in it, and I just remember thinking, "This is going to be the worst. We'll never do this again. It's never going to be this bad again."
Right.
So we've all just got to stay focused. And what's remarkable is you will see that episode now. You will know that there were trains going by. Nobody can tell it. It looks great. So that was probably the hardest. My favorite. I have two favorites. My favorite is Judy Woodruff.
Oh, she was so great.
Yeah, and I've known her. I used to work at the NewsHour back in the day, and I worked, for her. And she is the person that you see on TV and keeping it together. But there is this whole other person that we really unlocked, that you unlocked, where she's talking about disabilities as a person whose son has severe spina bifida, and talking about how that transforms her life and her background. And I just feel like that's where I really feel like the show is clicking and hitting all the gears that we want to hit.
Yeah.
When we reveal a person like that who makes themselves vulnerable in our format, and a person who doesn't typically make themselves that vulnerable by design of the job.
It was really generous of her. It was really generous of her to talk about it. And she said, like, her son was putting a catheter in himself as a 5-year-old. And then speaking of the mom, Kamau's mom, going to school and giving the slideshow, first of all, my friend Tantra said, my dad used to do that. But she, at some point, and she says it, I think, in the final edit, went to Jeffrey, her son's school, when he was in 3rd grade, because he had been being teased because he has diapers and sometimes they don't work, to give a presentation about spina bifida. So it's like this mother bear thing that she was incredible. She was incredible.
I think my other favorite was Scott Galloway. Scott Galloway, who's a professor of marketing, author, great talker, does a show with Kara Swisher. And I was pushing Kelly to interview Scott Galloway. Some resistance from Kelly at first, but I was excited because I felt like this is somebody you wouldn't normally spend time with.
Yeah.
And had opinions about going in.
Yeah.
And to me, that tension was interesting.
Yeah.
And he is somebody who can talk really intelligently about wealth and opportunity and about all the flaws in the system, while also representing all the success as he's benefited from that system. So that was, how did you feel about that one?
I was torn because on paper, every single thing he says I agree with. But he's got kind of a bravado that threw me a little bit. He's not as vulnerable. But then when we got talking, it turns out that his mom was a secretary for life, a single mom. And when she was dying, he went and he lived with her for 8 months. And so it was this repeated equalizer in every conversation that we're enriched by loss, to summarize it. There's like something that I believe deeply and that came out every time, that like many people are grounded by these very hard losses. And so then,
I also
worked
love the skepticism on your face during
I know.
the interview.
Steve is like,
Kelly's
I'm
just looking at it
editing,
like
and your
this,
face is like.
Yeah, staring at him like that. I love that. So I think we should.
But he
bring
is
more
like
guests
a clip
that.
a minute. Like you've never met somebody who can put words together like he can on the fly. It's outrageous.
I have a question for you.
Yeah.
I was thinking, because you do these interviews, and brief but spectacular. We've done hundreds, and they kind of show up in your life, and you adopt their behavior at times, and you kind of have to remind yourself, like, oh, I learned that from so-and-so, or I picked this up from so-and-so. Like Atul Gawande, he talked about this checklist that he does in the surgery room, and now in every production, we go around and we bring people in, and everybody from every PA to the grip and the gaffer says their name, and they say it and where you're from and something unusual about you, so that you hear yourself talk, because if you hear yourself talk, you're more likely to say there's a problem. And that was something I picked up, and I'm curious, having done these interviews and spent such intimate time with people, are there things that people have said that you find yourself, they've left you and they show up, things that people have said?
I mean, one thing has been super interesting is that there are these threads. Like, there is tremendous commonality in surprising ways between what the NewsHour does every day to put that show together, what Steve Kerr does every night to put the team together, what Atul Gawande does to put the surgery, the OR together and make it effective, and straight down the line, you know? So the principles that sort of floated to the top have been either super validating for me because I've suspected they might be true, or mind-blowing, you know? So everything from validating to mind-blowing in terms of like, that must be really true, because it really comes up no matter who you're talking to and no matter what sort of walk of life they're in. Like, there are these super principles that we could be referring to.
Right. Nothing's ever as good or as bad as it seems. Like, I remember when you asked that question, the mantras at the end.
Yeah.
I find myself using other people's mantras.
Yeah,
and then I'm like, I really, you know, I got that from so-and-so. That was Scott's. Nothing's as good as bad.
Yeah, nothing's good as bad as it seems. What are your questions?
Yes, we want to open it up to everybody here.
Don't be chickens. All right, I'm gonna. That's really intimidating. That's really.
People have to,
we got
people
one.
have to walk.
You don't even have to walk down. We can hear you. Go ahead.
First of all, I'm so grateful for this whole experience, being in this space with you, with the people you interviewed. I feel very grateful.
Me too.
And so I want to ask you, Kelly, oftentimes at the end of interviews, you convey what you learned, what you carry away is so powerful. And I want to know, in this whole process of these interviews you've been doing, this show and others, what you've learned about the process of being the interviewer, what you've learned about how to do it so well.
Well, I could tell you things that I'm afraid I don't do well. That's what came to mind first. I'm afraid that I'm too in love with my guests. Like, I'm so in love with Steve Kerr, it's a joke. Like, I couldn't believe, like, he's the only person out of 10 people who just did the booking with me directly. Like, he's like, Kelly, it's Steve. I'm so sorry. I made you wait a week. Let's do it. When do you want to do it? I'm like, what do you want to do? Like, so I fear that. Or I just want to tell everybody in the whole country, whoever's going to watch it, like, I'm not trying to, like, it's not gotcha journalism. I'm just trying to, like, show great people and make us feel hopeful again. Because I feel like there's such a thrill when you're around a great person, you know, like back when we used to be around each other. And you'd somehow meet somebody at a party or at a meeting or something, and you think, God, what a great person. And, like, I was, like, so energized all day long by a great person. And so that's all this is. I think I talk too much, probably, but I must say that Sarah Just, who runs the NewsHour, said to me when we first sat down, and she said, I think, you know, they kind of, Steve and Sarah and Melissa kind of put this together and said, you should pitch for this job, because there isn't really a replacement for that Charlie Rose one-on-one format, and there's interest in that. And so I went to see this Sarah Just person. I'd never met her. And she said, stay in the conversation. Do not go through your list of questions. Do not give people 7-word questions and then sit back and nod. Like, stay in it. Make it a conversation. And I go back to that all the time because I do fear sometimes that I'm talking more than the average interviewer. Though for me, like, I think I like, even if I were watching someone else, I think I would like it if they were really communicating, you know, if they were really saying additive things to one another. I mean, I'm learning a lot from the edit. So we tape for almost an hour and a half, and what you see is 29 minutes, and 3 or 4 of it goes to the +1. So we go from an hour and a half to 26 minutes. And it's interesting, and it's an interesting feedback loop for me to see what goes on the floor, because I'm not really deeply involved in the edit. I mean, I'm welcome to, but I sort of defer. And
Kelly ends every interview, some of them, and she says, "We have an hour special."
I do. Every time I'm like, this should not be half an hour. This should be an hour.
And I always say we have
He's like,
stellar,
or we have
stellar
an
half hour.
incredible 30 minutes.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I feel like I'm still really learning. Yeah.
But I'm always impressed with, I mean, it's really relaxing for me to have somebody like Kelly who comes in and is like ready to go. I mean, you are ready to go. I have worked with other people. They need a lot more support. They kind of, whether they tighten up or something, and you got to take them aside and review the questions. And I have to remind myself that I have a job to do to like get in Kelly's head a little. But the reality is she comes in ready to play and go. And the amount of research that you just absorb ahead of time is impressive, and I think shows up on the screen. And I think the guest, from doing interviews, I know that people get interviewed terribly all the time, and you know that from being an author. Yes. So they kind of come with their guard up, like, what's this person going to do? What are they going to do? I'm going to have to carry this thing. And so it is, you see it happen in an interview where the work's been done, and we put in a lot of work, and they relax a little bit. They're like Steve, he's like, oh, okay, good. You know, maybe I shouldn't have worn just shorts and a T-shirt. Maybe this is going to be a good thing.
He was working with the Olympic team.
He was, yeah. He was coming from practice. But you see that shift in them. I'm always proud of that.
Yeah. Yeah. The other thing to learn is that it's visual medium. So it's really that there are all these assets that are going to get added to it. So sometimes if a conversation, like I have a podcast, and on the podcast I don't have anything. It's either in your ear or it's not in your ear. Here, they're going to put music on. The B-roll, like the archival footage, is so rich and thorough. Like I remember the first time they showed me the Brian Stevenson episode, I was like, oh, my husband said, oh, it's like a mashup between like an interview and a documentary. Like it's so enriched by the visuals. So like tonight, my big feeling when I was watching is like, oh, I really don't ever have to worry about this, because if I just come in with tons of curiosity and like a bag of questions, all the rest comes after, and it's so good. Like all the pictures of Janet. How about Kamau's mom?
Yeah.
Like so fabulous, and the dad, and seeing him in his like fancy suit in the end. Like it's just, there's so many devices that we have at our disposal that I don't have on the page or in your ear.
Shout out to our editors too, who hope they're watching this on KQED Live. But they really. You feel supported by the team. Yeah. Melissa's doing her thing to run the company. You're doing your thing, asking the questions. I'm keeping things together. And the editors really bring it to another level. So it is kind of nice that you have people who can play in the sandbox and raise each
And you have music.
Games.
Like music is so impactful. And I was noticing it when we were watching tonight. It's like just these little mood changers. Yeah.
How do you pick who's going to be on? And like you might decide, oh, he's interesting, but he's a jerk, or nobody knows her, but she's got a really interesting story.
Right.
What's the whole process of who ends up being on the stage?
So I'll repeat the question because I know you want to get on the mic. How do you pick what's the process of choosing?
Yeah. I mean, one thing is we definitely wanted 50-50 men and women. We definitely wanted tons of variety. Old people, young people, black people, white people, straight people, gay people, like every married people, not married people, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then we wanted a variety of jobs, like some music, some sports, some business, some activists, philanthropy. And then it's a weekly phone call.
Yeah. But this season, I'm telling you, that we didn't stray that far from the list. I mean, the top of the list, it came. And Kelly, again, you're pretty aggressive going after the guests, which is very impressive. Mm-hmm. Whether it's Melinda Gates or calling Steve Kerr on the cell phone. I mean, you kind of have to do it.
But that's PBS. That's PBS. You can't I couldn't say, hey, I'm calling because I have a talk show on Netflix.
True.
Like Steve Kerr is not coming for Netflix.
True.
Melinda Gates is not, it has to be PBS. It has to be KQED. It has to be this brand
And it has to be you. I mean, the Brief but Spectacular was the same way. No, but it's got to be the person, like the show, the network. I don't know where we've worked. Like, they're not. No one's going to do it for you. Like, you have to push.
You do.
You have to push. I've learned that.
Yeah. It's a really scrappy process. A lot of begging and friends of friends and cousins and someone you dated in high school, and all of that is fair game. Like, we would chase anything. So if you know any amazing people that you think should be guests, you should totally tell me. I'm not even kidding.
Let us know.
Yeah.
Thank you. In the end, with the speed round, the answers were so good and so off the cuff. Tell me, did you give them the questions in advance? Yes. They were so good.
I know.
But they don't always read it in advance. Like Steve Kerr, there's no chance he read that. He had no idea that we even did the +1.
Yeah.
I think. Yeah.
Should I have not asked you that question?
Oh, no, it's fine. It's fine. I don't want anyone. I mean, I just want, like, when I sat down with Melinda Gates, I was like, my goal today is for this to be the favorite interview you've ever given. When we represented what you've been trying to do and what your beliefs are and what your thesis is about how to save the world the most accurately. That's what we're doing. And she was like, thank you. She just announced her divorce, and she was like, that's great. It's like, I bet. I mean, I might ask 1 or 2 questions, but.
But that was interesting when you chose to ask those questions, because obviously I feel like we were in the hotel room the night before talking about when.
I mean, not in the hotel room, Edward.
No, Edward, we were in a hotel lobby. I don't know. We're going over the questions, and there's a
whole pre-show ritual, but whatever.
And it was asking Melinda Gates. I mean, how can you not bring it up? It's in the New York Times every day about her divorce, and we kind of came to the decision that it doesn't feel right to do the Diane Sawyer thing in the chair, where we're really doing that and we're getting it like in the hot seat. But we did do this on the walk and talk, where I'm really proud of that question, the way you phrased it. You tell them what you said.
I said, I mean, don't think I don't know every word of this question. Because
I
was so worried. I really wanted to find the words the right way. And I said, your life's about to change a lot. Your daughter's getting married. You're about to become an empty nester. You're going to be single for the first time in 37 years.
Yeah, it was great. I was so happy
because her team.
I was always worried that her team was going to tackle us, when we were in the studio. But I actually don't even think they could hear the question while we were walking. So
but it was so funny because we're walking near this beautiful lake, and Stevie's like, I think they're in the bushes. I think her team's going to pop up and be like, don't answer that question.
Well, it was Melinda Gates too, and I asked the team. I was like, because we're walking in this weird community, like it just felt like nature. But I was like, what do we do if people come up because she's Melinda Gates? Like people could come up to her. They're like, no one's going to come up to her. And then I was like, how much security is there that I don't even know about? And they're just like, a lot. Yeah.
But talk about being in the bag for someone, like the stuff she's trying to do, the work she's doing, and the way she's doing it, like the thoroughness with which she approaches these monumental tasks that she's taken upon herself is so impressive. Any other questions? Yeah.
All right, kind of going off of someone else's question, regardless of geography or your people knowing their people or any other logistics, who would you want to interview and what would you want to talk to them about?
Dave Chappelle. I've wanted Dave Chappelle since I was a wee child. It's possible I'm just doing this entire show just to have a shot at talking to Dave Chappelle.
You could probably get him, Bay Area, right?
Yeah. I just think he's so special. I think he's such a special thinker, and I think the way he does what he does is so unusual and impactful. And he lives in Ohio. I would just love to talk to him.
I would want the Queen.
Oh wow!
Work-life balance. Brief but spectacular. I think we could get We
Oh
can
my
get a
God.
good 4 minutes.
Don't
yeah.
you think I'm a perfect match for the queen?
It'd be great.
I mean, all the touching I do, spontaneous touching and stuff. I don't.
Oh, yeah. We'd have to practice some of that stuff.
Yeah. I mean, COVID's been some practice for me, but that would be really hard. I mean, I just maul all these people. I've hugged them all goodbye. And yes, you, young lady.
What's your mantra these days?
More curiosity, less judgment, because I have this very, very smart friend who I rely on tremendously, and she taught that to me.
I have a good one. The thing that screws us up the most in life is the picture in our head of the way it's supposed to be.
Mm-hmm.
And I read that on a painting in Rita Moreno's bathroom, like 6 years ago. I swear to God. Yeah, it was on a towel or something. It said the thing. I was like,
you were in Rita Moreno's bathroom? Like,
Like-
that's all I heard. That's what
we
I
did
heard.
that project together. Yeah, and now I remember. I was like, I'm going to memorize that. I think,
Yeah.
that's it. That is always true.
Yeah. One more?
One more.
Come on, somebody give us a good one to end on.
And then we have to do a speed round.
All right, should I
for each other.
speed round you?
Yeah.
Okay, you can pick. These are my 3 favorites. You can pick one to answer, and all 3 if you're feeling generous.
Okay.
If your mother wrote a book about you, what would it be called? If you could say 4 words to anyone, who would you address and what would you say? And if your high school did superlatives, what would you have been most likely to become?
Oh. High school's impossible. Can't do it. I just.
Canada probably doesn't do superlatives because it's kind of rude in a way.
Exactly.
You know?
Exactly. In Canada, I grew up in Canada. My sister was athlete of the year, back-to-back years. My oldest sister, and so when I was a freshman in high school, above my locker there was a giant photo of my sister in a bathing suit on a water polo court like this. And it was just terrible. That was like, she was an
So
amazing
you were like
athlete.
most likely to be that incredible athlete's little brother.
Yeah, I was like Ellen's brother. Ellen will love this. I was Ellen's brother all through high school. The other ones I
I
like.
was somebody's little sister all through high school. Maybe it was good for us.
Yeah, exactly. My mother wrote a book about me. Stephen, you are amazing.
Aww.
That she says it all the time. It's terrible. It's not. And I would say the 4 words to my parents: thank you for everything.
You know what's so funny about the 4 words? A lot of people give you more than 4 words.
They
Remember
always
with
do.
Melinda? She was like, gave us like 8 words, and I was like, you can't do that. Just because you're Melinda Gates doesn't mean you can't play by my rules.
What's your mantra for hard times?
More curiosity, less judgment. Let go or be dragged. That's a new one for me.
That last book that blew you away.
Lila by Marilyn Robinson about poverty. It's the most beautiful narrative about this woman who can barely stand to let this man love her because she's so ashamed to have lived the way she's lived by no fault of her own. And it came out at the same time as Hillbilly Elegy, and I just was so frustrated that this beautiful Pulitzer Prize winner writer, Marilyn Robinson, was somehow not getting the readership. And if people really wanted to know what it felt like to be poor in America, I felt like Lila was the better choice. I guess that's the end of us getting J.D. Vance, huh?
If you could change any Supreme Court
Citizens United.
Yeah.
Wouldn't we all?
Yeah, I'd go back to Texas, I think.
Oh my
Abortion.
God.
There we go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well,
Thank you guys
Thank you so
much
much.
for coming.
it's so exciting not to watch this on my laptop.
Yeah. Thanks a lot for
Thank
coming
you
out
very
and
much.
being daring. It takes courage these days to leave the house, so good for you. And thanks for these.